Hi there. I'm Olivia Mattis, and it's my absolute delight to welcome you today on behalf of the Sousa Mendes Foundation. We are now in the month of June, and that is a month that's very important to us here at the Sousa Mendes Foundation. It was in June of 1940 that our hero, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, saved all of those lives. And so every June, we honor his memory in our programming. This month, we're spending the whole month focusing on France, starting with today's program. We have a beautiful film that you've all seen. We're privileged to have the filmmaker with us, Catherine Bernstein. And we have a moderator, Shulamit Reinhardt, who will tell us more about the program, give you a little bit of background, and introduce today's guests. So Shulamit, please take the floor.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this day. It is an honor to moderate today's discussion of the rescue of Jews in Lille, France, on September 11th, 1942. Why is that date important? Because it occurred after the Wannsee Conference, where the final solution was accepted as the policy of Germany. That policy was to kill every single Jew, man, woman, and child in Germany. I would like to make a few general points about the Holocaust and rescue, and then I will introduce our two amazing speakers, and they will have then almost the whole remainder of the show. First of all, rescue of Jews by non-Jews was not a one-size-fits-all operation. Each rescue was unique, and it reflected the people who were involved, the stage in the Holocaust, and the country in which it occurred. Rescue was impeded by Nazi sympathizers and people who betrayed Jews for money. Their countries of Europe and their institutions, such as churches, were deeply Semitic. That was the general background. What all these different rescue operations had in common was a few things, three things. In each case, you have to remember that helping Jews was a crime. It was a crime against the Third Reich, and you were treated harshly if you were involved. Second, you should remember that the Holocaust, as the murder of Jews, was carried out primarily with trains. Everyone knows about the gas chambers and the crematoria and the camps, but it was the trains that was like the I don't know what, the oil that got everyone to where they needed to be. So in an attack against a train or doing something to rescue people from trains was very important and very difficult, because putting the Jews on the trains was the last opportunity to rescue them. And third, the entire operation of the Holocaust, that is the Nazi decision to kill all Jews, depended on disinformation and deception. And this was achieved by Germany's outright lies, such as, we will not invade Holland, and then they did it. And it was achieved by distorting the language, so people didn't know what was happening to them. And that's why it appears that they were going like sheep. So now we're going to have the two people who are going to present today's show. The first is Catherine Bernstein. If you look up on the top row, I don't know if you all have the same thing, she's wearing the brown and white, very pretty French shirt. And it's called, her film, as you know, is the film you saw called SAUVONS les Enfants. That means let's save, or we must save the children. It is her latest film. She is a French director, and she's an award-winning filmmaker on rescue and resistance during World War II. Miss Bernstein has made 3 documentaries shot in Germany that deal with German guilt. They are Oma, which I have not seen, but Oma is the name that I called my grandmother. Sour Grapes, that is a quote from Aesop. And The Absent Ones, Murder of a Hatmaker. That film, the last one I mentioned, dealt with the plundering of the Jews because the Germans, as you know, took as much wealth as they could from the Jews to finance the war. It was a film about the plundering of the Jews by the Vichy government. 2 other notable films are Alan Turing, The Code of Life, a little different topic, although it was also during the war, and Fritz Bauer, a prosecutor against the Nazis. And we will hear from her at the end of the program. The other person that we are having is Dr. Susan Zuccotti. If you have found Catherine Bernstein, then Susan is right next to her, looking very academic in front of all those books. She is a distinguished modern European historian and the recipient of so many awards that I'm not going to mention a single one. But the topics include very interesting topics, just like Catherine's. A biography of a French Capuchin priest who, working closely with Jewish friends and associates, a priest working closely with Jewish friends and associates, rescued thousands of Jews in Marseille and Rome during the Holocaust. Susan's 2 areas of expertise are Italy and France. This book's title is Père Marie Benoit and Jewish Rescue. One little point in there, we have to remember that Christians have saved Jews throughout history, and it should inform the relationship today between Christians and Jews. Dr. Zuccotti is the author of The Italians and the Holocaust Persecution, Rescue and Survival. Under his very windows, The Vatican and the Holocaust in Italy. And another book, The Holocaust Odysseys, The Jews of Saint-Martin-Vesubie and Their Flight Through France and Italy, 1939 to 1945. Dr. Zuccotti has taught Holocaust studies at Columbia and my alma mater, Barnard College. Unfortunately, we were not there at the same time. Those are in New York City and at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. And we are going to start with Susan Zuccotti, who is going to give you the framework for Catherine's film.
Thank you, Shulamit. And yes, I am going to try to provide a historical context for the activities of September 11th, 1942 in Lille. Begin with a very brief mention of the Battle of Belgium, the Battle of France, and the battle for the city of Lille, just to remind you how rapid and tremendously disconcerting it was. The Germans invaded Belgium on May 10th, and by the end of June, Belgium had surrendered and also France had surrendered. Pétain had announced that he would cease hostilities on June 17th. That led to the armistice between the French and the Germans a few days later. This is a map of what resulted from the armistice between the French and the Germans. You are surely familiar with the occupied zone, the big occupied zone, German occupied zone in the north, the unoccupied zone in the south. But less familiar to all of us is what happened to the 2 French departments of the Nord and the Pas-de-Calais under the terms of the French armistice. Those 2 French departments were awarded by the terms of the armistice to Belgium. so that during the war, until 1945, they were administered by German military authorities based in Brussels rather than those who were based in Paris. Why does this matter? This matters because for the people of those two departments, and Lille, by the way, as you can see, was the capital of the Department of the Nord. The people of those two French departments suddenly found themselves as French citizens, French patriots living and assigned to a different country. This was upsetting, disconcerting, and it made them very angry. Just a few statistics of the story. I wish I could provide more, but I'd like you to understand that more than 500 Jews who had been arrested on September 11th, 1942, in the two departments of the Nord and the Pas-de-Calais, remember that according to the film, before the train arrived in Lille, it had picked up Jewish arrested Jews in the Pas-de-Calais and other parts of the two departments before it arrived in Lille. So 500 some Jews arrested that day went on from Lille to the detention camp of Malines-Mechelin. Malines was the French name and Mechelin was the Flemish language name for the camp. Most of those 500 prisoners were sent directly to Auschwitz very, very soon after, and only 15 of those individual prisoners survived. This is a picture of the Malines-Mechelin transit camp. It was an old army barracks in Malines, about 30 miles north of the town of Malines, 30 kilometers north of Brussels. And in this camp, from this camp, during the course of the German occupation of Belgium, some 25,267 people were sent to Auschwitz, and only 1,240 survived. A few observations I'd like to make about this story of rescue on the railroad platform of Lille on September 11th, 1942. The train pulled in, the arrested Jews of Lille were waiting on the platform. If anything, it was the last moment that they could be helped. The rescue operations that you read about in the film were totally spontaneous, unplanned, unorganized, individualist. People had to make their decisions immediately without a lot of forethought. Without this planning, however, some 25 railwaymen did seem to coalesce with others to facilitate a more cooperative rescue, and we see that in the film. It is quite astounding, really. And then the impressive follow-up is mentioned in the film, but it's something worth noting. After the 41 Jews from waiting on the platform had been taken out of the hands of the German police, they had to be hidden. They had to, families had to be found to take in the 26 children who had been rescued. And then over time and until the end of the war, for false papers, ration books, financial support, moral support had to be provided. And records of where the people were hiding had to be maintained for post-war recovery of those children, particularly, so that they could be returned to whatever remained of their families. All of this took an organization which occurred. It's a story, fascinating story over time, and it led to a broader resistance movement. The organizations of Rescue for Jews tended to blend into broader resistance organizations in the area and in both France and Belgium. And it is all in all a tremendously fascinating story. Now I'd like to ask you or address the question of why did the rescuers do what they did? This is a long subject, like more time and for details, but I think one factor may well have been that residents of Lille were angry that they had been separated from France, that they had been made part of Belgium. The German occupation, in other words, was more onerous because they were, in addition to experiencing the German occupation, they were experiencing it technically from another country. Another reason would be that I think many railway workers were left-wing and firmly anti-Nazi, politicized already. But the previous experience with German occupation was also a factor. The Nord and the Pas-de-Calais had suffered greatly from German occupation during the First World War. Some 20,000, I have read, young people were deported by the Germans to Germany for labor during the First World War. The Germans occupied the Nord, the Department of the Nord, for the entire duration of the First World War. So there was a lot of anti-German sentiment stemming back to 1914 to 1918, the First World War. There had also been the battle the Battle of France, the German occupation, the German invasion of France had gone right through the city of Lille. There had been a lot of destruction, bombing, executions, cruelty, brutality, and destruction. And I believe that politicized people in Lille to an extraordinary degree. Also, in June of 1941, a massive coal miners strike occurred in June of 1941 in the Pas-de-Calais, which was repressed brutally by the German occupying forces, as would be expected. It was an incredibly brave thing for the coal miners to even attempt. Some 250 coal miners were deported to camps, and many of them were executed. It was brutally repressed. I think another factor in rescue, very often rescuers can act with a little bit more security if they sense a broader approval of the local population. So that factor would stem back to what I've already said about previous experience with German occupation and anger about the separation. The most important factor, undoubtedly, however, is the sheer decency of these individuals, the humanitarian factors, the altruism involved. I wish I could have more time to talk about that most important dimension of our story, but I don't. This is a picture of Marcel Hoffmann, who was awarded the title of Righteous Among the Nations at Yad Vashem in November 2020. He passed away in 1956, unfortunately, but he was honored in 2020. This is a picture of photograph provided to me by Catherine, very kindly, of 3 other railway workers who were on the platform in September 1942, who rescued Jews, and who I believe are being now considered for the very serious and very prestigious award of the Righteous Among the Nations from Yad Vashem. Thank you. And now I pass to Catherine.
Hello. First of all, because of my English level, I prepare a text and I will read it to you. I'm sorry. My name is Catherine Bernstein, or Bernstein, I don't know how to pronounce it. My parents met in 1962, 70 years after the Second World War. My mother is German, the daughter of an anti-Semitic man who, for career reasons, joined the Nazi Party. My father was French, a Jew whose family was particularly affected by the extermination. He himself had to go out hiding as a child. So I had grandfather in 2 different camps. When I became a documentary filmmaker, I was naturally drawn to these topics. First one film, then another. Little by little, I gained the support of French television and I continued my quest. I've made films about the extermination of Jews, Gypsies, and disabled people during the Nazi era. I'm haunted by injustice, whether toward homosexuals or people from colonized countries. In 2021, I made a documentary about the history of the SNCF, the French railroads, during the German occupation. Since the liberation, France has built a false heroic myth regarding this company. My film showed that contrary to the legend in which the French grew up, while some railwaymen had been resistance fighters and had taken considerable risk, the company's management had supported the total policy of collaboration and had consciously participated in the deportation of 76,000 Jews from France. It was while working on this film that I learned from the historian Serge Klarsfeld that there were railway workers in Lille who had saved Jews from the deportation. I did some research and discovered a book on the subject by a historian from Lille, Gregory Sellers. I contacted him to ask for some documents and photographs so that I could include in my documentary 2 minutes about what happened at 5 Lille station on September 11th, 1942. He did it generously, which is remarkable because he himself had the desire to make a film on the subject. That's how we met, and one day Gregory asked me to direct the film. Gregory gave me the fruit of over 8 years' research. It was impressive. He had research in national, departmental, or regional archives, as well out in the field, trying to understand precisely where this story had taken place. He had sought out and contacted railway families and Jewish families. It was pages and pages of documents, reports, testimonies, list of names, letters, objects, photographs, and while I was writing, he kept discovering new pieces of the puzzle. I had too many ingredients on the table. As a director, you have to make choices in order to draw a narrative thread. It's a bit like cooking. You don't bake a cake with all the ingredients in your cupboard. You make choices by taking only 5 ingredients, for example. Otherwise, it would be indigestible. When you see the film, if it's a success, the choices seems obvious, but they didn't happen overnight. They are the fruit of a long process. The first choice was to tell what happened that day and only on that day, because the rescue then continued for 2 years, which is also an incredible story. Unity of time. Secondly, to use only direct witnesses, children who had been rescued and who were old enough to have memories, on one hand, and on the other, to restore the word of the railwaymen, thanks to the reports of their testimony that Gregory had collected. No historians, no experts, no sons or daughters of those rescued or of railwaymen. only first-hand witnesses. Well, because what actually happened that day was very complicated to understand, and we are only recounting a tiny part of it, that there was a unity of place, but that this place, the Lille 5th station, no longer exists. I came up with the idea to reconstruct the station in miniature model form. While the story itself was fascinating, I was also very touched by Gregory's incredible work over these 8 years and wonder what would happen if this work wasn't included of the film. To not show how this story emerged from obscurity. That's when I came up with the idea of inventing a kind of workshop where a narrator would collect the fruit from his years of research, which would enable him to reconstruct the station and then, little by little, to penetrate this station and thus this story in 1942. So I hope you enjoyed the cake I baked. But first and foremost, I must recognize how special Gregory is, because I never met anyone like him who had spent all this year doing this research on his own, using his own funds, and taking the time to give unknown people in USA, Israel, and all over France their own story. And so, after years of research, Gregory was able to find the name of 42 people saved that day. There are others, probably around 60. The search continues, but until now, nobody knew this story. Without him, this story wouldn't never have emerged from oblivion. And without him, I wouldn't have been able to make this film. He couldn't be with us today, for example, in France it's nearly night. And thank you for having seen my film.
Great. Well, it's a privilege to show your film. And thank you for your presentation. And Dr. Susan Zuccotti, thank you for yours. Let me now encourage the audience to continue putting your great questions into that chat box. Dr. Shulamit Reinhardt is busy collecting those questions. And while she collects your questions, I'm going to tell you what we have upcoming here at the Sousa Mendes Foundation. So there is a film series that was made by Portuguese television. It's a fabulous film series called Visas for Life. 5 episodes, 30 minutes each, all on the Sousa Mendes story. And we here at the Sousa Mendes Foundation had a lot to do with the making of this film. It's almost a co-production. So what we're going to be doing is over the next 4 weeks, we're going to show you those 5 films. So each week for the next 3 weeks, you will be getting 1 episode. And then the final week, we'll be getting the last 2 episodes. And during that time, we are going to be having 2 programs. So we have a program 2 weeks from today, which is June 18th. And we have a program on July 2nd. So right now, we're going to see a little trailer for the film series called Visas for Life.
Aristides Sousa Mendes teve a coragem de não cumprir uma ordem errada e nós devemos homenageá-lo por isso.
Je lui dis c'est mon père. Et là,
that's my father.
Father Joe and Bella,
Yeah.
your mom. Joe was the one who got the visa signed.
Durante a nossa jornada, nós tivemos que sair do carro e nos lançamos numa trincheira porque tinha um avião nazista que sobrevoava e metralhava os carros que estavam aí.
My father's
One day, he heard that the Portuguese consul was giving visas.
Everybody was screaming and yelling and pushing and shoving.
Ele, a certa altura, é perdido por 100, perdido por 1000 e passa.
Next, next, next.
And on our passport, he wrote, Arismum, because he was in a hurry.
He means to me everything, my life, my children, my grandchildren, and great-grandson.
Sousa Mendes tried to leave Portugal. I think this is not well known. So once again, I encourage you to sign up for the film series. It's completely free. We have a sponsor for all 5 films. Her name is Eva Warner. She herself is a Sousa Mendes visa recipient who is featured in the film series. You actually saw her there in the trailer right before me. And so she's making it possible for you all to sign up free of charge. And please tell all your friends. It's really, I think, the best thing that's ever been done on the Sousa Mendes story. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Shulamit Reinhardt, who will be responding to your questions.
Hi again, everybody. Good to see you. I disagree with what Olivia said, that that's the best. I think today was the best. And of course, I have said that before. We have some wonderful people in the audience, including Mordechai Paldiel, who had a major position at Yad Vashem for a long time. Mordechai, even though you didn't pose a question, do you want to tell us anything about how it was that the people the railway workers connected to Lille got their case accepted? Do you know?
I want to say hello to my friend Susan Zaccardi. We originally met in Padua, Italy, many years ago, yes, where we highlighted the story of the genocide of the Armenians by the Ottomans. But I also spoke about the Yad Vashem program, and that's where I met Susan, and because I read all of her books, and I became more educated thanks to her. So thank you, Susan, for your education. The little story, I started collecting the documentation, but by the time I left Yad Vashem, it had not yet passed the test of the Commission for the Righteous. That happened after I left Yad Vashem. I had no doubt that it would be accepted. I want to point out now, I did a major study of the situation in Poland. In Poland, the Polish underground was very active in derailing German trains. All over the place, there were trains that had been sabotaged, derailed, and so the sad thing about Poland, where most Jews who perished in the Holocaust lived in Poland, 3 million Jews, there was never an attempt by the underground there, which fought the Germans very valiantly, and they many of the underground people were worked on the trains, never did it enter their minds to save some of the children, to derail the trains, taking people to Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, and Auschwitz, of course. It never entered the mind. It entered their mind when the Germans began to colonize an area in Poland called Zamość, and they took away the children, and they were going to send them to another place. Then many people lined up at the train station to take these children, these Polish non-Jewish children, and find for them sheltering homes, but not for Jewish children. So the contrast is so vast between what happened in Poland, and I want to applaud the Polish people who saved Jews. I worked at that, and I was very instrumental in honoring thousands of Poles, and I wrote a book about that just came out, Poles Who Saved Jews. But in general, in Poland, nothing like what happened in Lille took place, nothing like that. So this is so unique in Lille. As you pointed out, Susan, there was popular support. but these people, these cheminots, had the popular support of many Frenchmen. Again, careful, not all Frenchmen, but more among the French population felt that the way Jews were being treated or mistreated, that went far beyond the pale. And in Poland, the population was not that friendly towards the Jewish presence in Poland. So I'm very glad that one of those railway workers was already honored by Yad Vashem. It happened past my time at Yad Vashem, and hopefully these several others will also receive the accolade which they certainly very well merit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mordechai. There's a question here. I don't know who can answer it, whether it's Catherine or Susan, which is, how old was the little girl Henriette Lerner?
I think she was 8 years old.
Please repeat the connection with the number 76,000 that you mentioned. I think that's a question to Susan.
Repeat the significant, the 76,000 is the number of Jews roughly who were deported from France during the entire years of the Shoah.
And that represents approximately 1/4 of the French population.
That's correct.
Which is
of the
Jewish population.
of the total Jewish, French and foreign Jews in France.
I saw Catherine shaking her head. Tell me what.
I would say that most of them arrived in France in the beginning of the 20s.
Right.
Most of them came from Poland.
But why does that matter? They're Jews.
No, it's just to precise that it was more easier to deport them because they had not so much a friend in France. They were more weaker.
That's right. I understand. And that was true in Germany.
Accent, and they had no support. So it was easier to, they spoke Yiddish or Polish. I give this precision. Of course, a life is a life.
That's right.
And if I may add, many of them are what the French called apatrides, were already interned by the French and the Vichy in Gurs, in the Camp de Mille. And so when the Germans asked the French to fill up a train with thousands of Jews, the Vichy government preferred what they said to get rid of these foreign Jews who already were under their control, like in Gurs, and they were taken to Drancy. There was a deep division in the French government between what they considered the historical Jews who were citizens and the newcomers, the greenhorn, those who had come recently, as was just now told, who spoke mostly Yiddish, and many of them had not yet been naturalized. But even those who were naturalized, after 1927, their naturalization was voided and so on. The Germans asked the Vichy government to move it up to before 1927, and here Laval said, no, we can't do that because the French population would not agree with that. So I just if I may add one more thing, the star was imposed on the occupied zone. When the Germans wanted the French Vichy to impose the star in the Vichy zone, Vichy said, no, the star is not going to be imposed in the Vichy zone because the population there would not agree with that. They would think that this is too harsh. So whereas every Jew has on his ID the word Juif, but the star was not imposed in the Vichy zone. So you see, there's a difference between France and some other countries like Holland and not to mention Poland and so forth.
Yes, and I would just add that although the statistics are rough and not precise, if you try to determine the percentage of French Jews who were deported, it drops to about 12%. if you try to calculate the percentage of foreign Jews, definitions, of course, naturalization and all play in, so the statistics are rough, but if you try to pinpoint the percentage of foreign Jews who were deported from France, it rises to 46%. So there is a tremendous difference between the experience of foreign Jews and citizen Jews in France.
So it was, to build on what both of you have said, it's not as if it was just a prejudice of the French against Polish Jews, but all foreign Jews.
It was definitely not limited to Polish Jews, that's true, although it was limited in the sense that the Germans were very regular and direct regulations about who was to be arrested, so that initially in July of 1942, when 12,000 foreign Jews were arrested in Paris, it was done by category of nationality of origin. So that, for example, at that time, Italian Jews, Spanish Jews, and even Hungarian Jews were not deported. They were not fair game, partly because the countries from which they'd come were in some way or other allied to or neutral to the Germans. So it was, it depended on the nationality of origin of the foreign Jews, what their fate would be at different times throughout the years of occupation.
Yes, so these differences are very important. There is Dorothy Zellner who asked a question. I'm curious about the relationship between these railroad workers. How did they know how to trust each other? In the first moments, were they in a union together? I assume they might have been in the French Communist Party, which had a leading role in the French resistance. Who would like to take Dorothy Zellner's question?
I can try to begin, but after I would like the help from Susan. Of course, the communists would say, we made the rescue. And of course, in northern France, there was a strong power of the union. But in this story, and that's what I try to tell in the film, there was people who were used to be part of the resistance and who belongs to the communist group. But some other didn't. And it was really spontaneous. It was not prepared. And the one who belongs to secret groups were more effective because they knew how to work and to hide and to react very fast and to work together, while some other did it from them on their side, like Marcel Haussmann, for example. But he rescued also a lot of lives. So it's a mixed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I answered. Maybe Susan, you can.
No, I think that's perfect, Catherine. That's exactly what I, with less information, far less information than you have, that is exactly what I would have thought or said. So I think that you're absolutely right.
And because I studied French in high school, I'm going to read the next one in French. Madame Bernstein, vous avez fait un film extraordinaire, vos choix difficiles sur ce qu'il fallait inclure et comment raconter l'histoire est un excellent. Did you understand the thing I said?
Yes. I thank you, because in fact, I was afraid till the end of the editing if the dispositif works, because in fact I'm telling a deportation story. Of course, some of them were rescued, but most of them died. And I thought telling a story with very small plastic figurine, puppets, it's 1 centimeter high. I took the risk that it looks like a game. And for me, it's a serious thing. So I wasn't sure that it will work. So thank you very much. I don't know the name of the person who wrote me this message in French, but thank you. I'm very, I'm very touched.
Okay, well, a lot of people are thanking you. One more woman wrote, and I'll read this in English. Thank you so much, so moving. I was sobbing. You know,
what
sobbing?
does it mean? No, I don't know. Oh.
Pleurer? Sobbing throughout the movie. And yes, recreating with the miniature model was so creative and effective to help revisit the story. I applaud all of your amazing years of work putting this together. Great cake. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I want to ask Susan something. In the very beginning, you helpfully shared, shared some maps. And you showed how these two, Pas-de-Calais and Lille, no, what was the other one?
The Nord.
Became part of Belgium. Mm-hmm. And Joanne Gilbert says, was there a particular reason that the Germans annexed those two departments in Belgium?
There seem to have been several reasons. One reason was that the Pas-de-Calais in particular was along the English Channel. So there were security issues there on the part of the Germans. So that was one factor. Another is that, again, both departments were very industrial, so that the Pas-de-Calais was a source of coal, a very important source of coal mining, and textile workers in the Nord, and in particular in Lille, were important, working with leather and other textile goods. And I guess it was in metallurgy, the processing of metal. So it was an industrial center. I have read, and I have never seen it totally verified, that it was also done because Hitler had thoughts of annexing all of Belgium and the Pas-de-Calais and the Nord after the German victory. And this because he saw both Belgium and the Nord and Pas-de-Calais as regions where there was a heavily German-speaking or Flemish-speaking or Dutch orientation, one way or another, which would make them, those areas, more fitting to be part of the Grand Reich that was going to emerge after the war.
And that's because Hitler saw them as Aryans, saw them as very similar, actually coming from the same source. So as people who have been on this program in the past know, we give final thoughts. And so I will give a final thought, and then Catherine and Susan, and then Olivia will say goodbye. My final thought is that the pairing of Catherine and Susan, a filmmaker and an historian, is a wonderful way to understand a phenomenon in the Holocaust. You praised, Catherine, you praised Gregory, and he did all the background work, but you're putting it into the film with this unique creation, like a little Lego set of what the place looked like, made it comprehensible. Mm-hmm. So I applaud the Susan Mendes Foundation for always having a film included with experts. It's a really great way to learn. And now, did I say Catherine was next or Susan?
I think I'm next, but
please.
What did I learn is that Mensch existed. I don't know if you understand Mensch. It's a Yiddish word. And that's a good thing, because otherwise I'd have given up hope.
Right. And do you see how important the next generation is? You and I are both second generation, Catherine. And Susan,
I would just say about rescuers and why they did it and who they were, that I have a great friend, now deceased, Nahama Tek, who was a Polish Jew hidden in Warsaw, who wrote, among many other books, a book called When Light Pierced the Darkness. I think that was the name of the book, unless I'm mixing up. Don't quote me on the name of the book. She interviewed Polish rescuers and why they did it and what they had in common. And she found that they had very little in common, the rescuers. They came from all classes, all levels of wealth or poverty. They were rural or they were urban. They came from different backgrounds in terms of education as well as class. Some were religious and some were not religious. These are those who have been identified as rescuers in Poland. And the only thing she came up with as a common thread between these different kinds of rescuers and different backgrounds is that they shared a degree of independent thought, a kind of an ability to live their lives apart and make judgments apart from the common herd, if you will. Some of them lived alone, but they had independent attitudes toward life and independent, individualistic attitudes toward politics, and made their decisions on the basis of sheer humanity. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
And the Germans knew this, and that's why they didn't allow any independence of thought. Olivia, would you like to conclude our program?
Thank you for coming today, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Thank you to our panel and our moderator. Thank you all. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.